walking paths, and then domestic violence. Okay, so educational neglect. Usually truancy is going to be involved with that far before we would be for a child welfare stance. Medical neglect, some type of pre-existing medical condition that the child needs care for. You know, it could be like they have a broken bone, like it just happened. It's not this pre-existing condition that requires attention, but a broken bone does require attention at that point, right? So we had like a little baby that had a seizure disorder, and parents, they weren't taking the baby to the doctor regularly. You know, the medication changes based on the weight of the baby. Little babies grow really fast. So they weren't taking the baby in, so he wasn't getting the appropriate amount of medication. And then the baby would have a seizure, and every time they have a seizure it would cause brain damage, and they wouldn't take the baby into the hospital when he's having a seizure or right after. So that's medical neglect. That's a pretty obvious example.
How does religion play into that?
So that can go either way. Usually, if it's a really serious situation, a judge is going to have to make the call. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do failure to protect. Failure to protect. So, let's say the domestic violence situation, you have the victim that continues to be in this relationship with this violent person, continually has the child in that situation, being more and more traumatized by witnessing that domestic violence. Sometimes kids will even jump in the middle and try to stop the fighting. So that can be failure to protect. Like, let's say that the neighbor down the street molests my child, okay? And I know that he molested my child, but I continue to use him for daycare because he doesn't charge me. Like, that's going to be failure to protect. I know that's not a safe person, and I continue to send my child there. The other one was lack of supervision. Okay, so in an institutional setting, that can be, you know, not enough staff versus child ratio, and kids are getting hurt. Things are happening, like the kids are, you know, perping on each other sexually because there's just not enough people versus the kid ratio. That can be lack of supervision. You know, sometimes you have these little escapees that, I mean, we had kids escape from a daycare and they were wandering around like busy roads. Okay, so, and we've had kids at daycares get locked outside, like, because, you know, they didn't do their head counts, like make sure all the kids were accounted for when they came back inside. Lack of supervision in a family type setting. There is no age in the state of Colorado that a child has to be left home alone. Okay, so this is when some reasoning comes into play. So let's say you have this 11-year-old that is very mature, they're very responsible, they are not afraid, they're not scared to be home alone, they ride the bus home, they go straight in the house, they lock the door, they know they're not to use the oven, or, you know, they have a phone, they can call 911, they also know the neighbor that they can go to for help. Mom's going to be home from work in an hour. Who's worried? Okay. So same scenario, that same 11-year-old is also responsible for their 5-year-old brother, their 2-year-old sister, and the 5-month-old, and mom works graveyard shift. Okay. So some of that comes down to some reasoning. You know, the kids are always out in the street, like, you know, 2 a.m. in the morning. Like, sometimes we have kids wandering around in busy streets in the middle of the night. Kids have almost frozen to death. Actually, had someone call because they would let their dog out in the middle of the night and they heard crying. And instead of being like, that's weird, and going back to bed, they actually started walking around the neighborhood and they found this little 2-year-old in just a diaper. Okay, it's like freezing, it's like winter, and he's just crying, trying to get back in the house. And, you know, the parents are, you know, passed out from drugs and alcohol, and the kid had gotten out, and that child would have died. Right? Okay. So here are some indicators. Maybe you see this in some of your kids. feeding can be an interesting thing to observe with kids, right? Because they're all pretty unique. Could be pretty unique in that scenario. Some of them are just always starving. They were like tearing your hand off when you're giving them the food. Have you ever had kids hiding and stealing food?
No. I don't know what you're listening or doing at home.
Yeah. So that can be an indicator of abuse or neglect. They don't know when their next meal is coming, so they're going to be stashing it. Okay. Poor school attendance. Sometimes this and school like constant fatigue. This can be like poor parenting. Like, oh no, I can't get him to go to school. He won't listen to me. Or you know, if you have kids that are falling asleep all the time, you can just be like, oh, you're so tired. Sometimes it's because they get to stay up till 2 a.m. playing Fortnite, right? That's like, I guess kids are in love with that game. So that's poor parenting, but sometimes they can't stay awake because they were up until, like they were up all night long listening to their parents fight and they thought one of them was gonna die and the cops came. So it's important to just, you know, find out how come you're tired, because it can mean very different things. Sometimes kids are not going to school because they know that their younger siblings aren't gonna get fed. So they will assume that adult responsibility, like I'm gonna make sure that my kids or my siblings get to eat today. I'm not gonna go to school, I'm gonna stay home and feed them because I know that mom, dad, whoever is not getting out of bed to do it. They're passed out or whatever it may be. And then developmental delays, like I said, sometimes those are naturally occurring, sometimes they're because of neglect. Like kids are like way behind, they're just not, you know, like my mom used to work in kindergarten, she'd be like, these kids, some of them don't even know what a crayon is, they've never even seen it. Like, it's kind of sad. Alright, so our physical indicators, we talked about failure to thrive a little bit. You know, sometimes it's genetic. Some kids are just genetically smaller than others sometimes. You can have failure to thrive not just because parents aren't feeding kids, but I've seen domestic violence cause this failure to thrive. Because the trauma, like your body's going to focus on growth always to your head first, and like your body's not going to grow as well if it's always in a situation of trauma. Talked about the hunger, poor hygiene. Sometimes that can be like a generational poverty type thing. You know, being poor isn't abuse or neglect, but sometimes kids are really dirty just because there's a lot of other things going on in the home that are neglect, like the substance abuse, so kids just aren't getting the proper care. So we talked about the medical needs. You know, sometimes that can just be even something like glasses, like they cannot progress in school because they cannot see the board. It's been a year and the parents are not taking them to get the glasses. Consistent lack of supervision, so those kids are like out in the middle of the street all the time. I got a call today just about that. Little kids always in the street, parents aren't even home. Abandonment is when a parent makes no arrangement for the care of their child. Just, you know, peace out, they're gone. If they do make an arrangement, sometimes the arrangement's not appropriate. So if you have a concern about that arrangement, sometimes you need to make a call on that. But a parent can say to a good friend, hey, I need you to take care of my kid. They make an arrangement, they agree to a time frame. Sometimes that person's like done. At that time frame, parent isn't back. So that can be abandonment. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Thank you.
Keep going.
Yeah, we got some dirty home pictures there. So I have never seen an institution look like this, but you know, it could. There's group homes that probably get pretty out of control, right? I just personally haven't seen it. But this is our environment injurious neglect category. As you can see, this is a kitchen. We're not really sure if these people are getting to eat because you can't really get to anything. I'd be curious what's in the fridge. When we're talking about dirty houses, the age of the child's going to make a big difference for me. Okay, so if there's a 18-year-old in the home, it's still not okay, but they can take out the trash, right? If we've got crawlers on the ground, they're going to be putting this kind of stuff in their mouth, getting buried in it. Okay, that's a countertop. We've got like bugs. So like bug infestations. Had to like say goodbye to some clothes and shoes forever after being in houses like this. So infestations. Alright, this is, you know, just some trash that hasn't been cleaned up. This isn't very bad. Okay, we're gonna be worried about this because
There's a knife.
there's a big old butcher knife in the middle of this room. Okay, how old are these kids? How dangerous is this situation for those kids? Well, adults can choose to live like this if they want.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, possibly
Maybe.
just like reaching for something with their leg for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be touch and go, getting up and down those stairs, right? This is a garage. I'm not sure. Like, we don't really care what your garage looks like unless you're living in it. Poop. Okay, so people will call and be like, "Oh, the house is so filthy. It's disgusting." I need to know why. Because filthy and disgusting means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, so I'm gonna need details. Like, is there poop? Like, what is the stuff that is everywhere? Like, is it mail and laundry? Because you could be talking about my house, right? I need to know what those things are because it has to be something that it makes the child unsafe, that situation unsafe for them. So this cat poop, who knows what kind of poop that is? That's mold. So this is actually like part of an otter pop, but we've got like drug paraphernalia back here. Okay, so how old is the kid? Where is this located in the house?
Looks like on a counter. There's a knife, right? What is that?
There's a pipe.
A pipe.
There's a pipe here.
Yeah.
Here's medicine.
So they're making something there, they got some sore throat medicine, they got
Where's Waldo?
medicine.
Yeah.
Sick. Sick, man.
Okay, needles. Like, are they diabetic? Or do they have a drug problem? I don't know. Spoons. Burnt residue on there. The pipe right here. We got some little baggies.
Oh no.
Who makes jewelry in here? Like, I always think like maybe they're jewelry makers. I don't know. Maybe they're drug dealers. You know, jewelry
I'm
drug
leaning
dealers.
towards
one of
the
the
second
two.
one a little bit more. Wanna look it up?
Okay, so marijuana is kind of the hot topic, right?
Yeah.
So it gets treated very similarly to alcohol and prescription drugs, which are also legal. Okay, but if you're using those things to the point that you can't parent, it's neglect, regardless of whether it's legal or not. So with marijuana, it seems like, you know, you've got people that can set limits for themselves, you know, like they put the kids to bed and they go outside and they have their joint or whatever, they keep their marijuana in a lockbox, you know, top shelf of the closet. Are we worried?
No.
Not really worried about that. But if you have the parent that, you know, maybe they're not so great at setting their limits and they're smoking all day long, they're like blowing it into their kids' faces, they're driving under the influence, like they're so high they then have to take the 6-hour nap and we're finding their 2-year-old in the middle of Patterson. Like they're not, that's neglect. Okay, so it's not all like, marijuana's legal, do your thing. And then also with the edibles, I mean, who doesn't love brownies? Like, I love brownies. Kids love brownies too. And if they're on the counter, they might just eat them. So all of that marijuana stuff has got to be locked up, out of reach of the kids. They cannot use around the children. And you also can't have a grow where kids live. So you have to decide, am I gonna grow little people or am I gonna grow marijuana plants? Right? It's a hard choice
Not
for some people. It really is. I know every grow, when I walk into a grow, I just get this immediate headache. It's just, yeah, it's bad. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. A parent comes in to pick up their kid and they reek of marijuana and their eyes are just bloodshot. But you didn't see them smoking anything in the car when they pulled up or anything like that. They just stink and they're picking up their kids to get in their car and drive them home. What do you, can
I
you?
would make a report on that because it seems like they're driving under the influence.
Yeah.
And that's,
So they leave with them and you make the report, or you're like, hey, hold on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make
what
it
is-
now while you're standing here and possibly I need
Well,
backup.
you know, so I'm gonna compare it to alcohol as well.
Okay.
Because, you know, there's different levels of intoxication, right? So, if they seem to like have their wits about them, I mean, are they stumbling? Are they like falling asleep? Are they slurring their words? Like, are they so impaired you're worried about their ability
they're
to
not.
drive?
And they're not. And I can't.
Okay.
I can't physically tell that they're under the influence. I can just smell it, and their eyes are red, and
Mhm.
I just know.
Mhm.
I just know, but I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah, it
He's
sounds
walking
report
in.
worthy to me.
Okay.
But you don't have to be the one to make the judgment call, like,
Mhm.
I'm intervening, I'm not letting you take your kid because you smell like marijuana. But I mean, if you have like somebody that can't even stand up straight, you know, usually marijuana people they can stand up straight, but
Gotcha.
sometimes they're just so glazed, you're like, I don't really know if you're safe to drive. If it's
What about
obviously an
kids?
unsafe situation, I'd be calling 911. Like, because we know that drunk people, very highly impaired people on the road are very, very dangerous.
Can I just throw something out there?
Yeah.
That's why it's super important, at least to me, is to like go up to your parents and make contact with them and say, hey, your child was, you know, this day and that kind of thing. I've actually had a parent drive impaired with a child. I wasn't the teacher involved, but I worked at the center, and it's just absolutely sad. The teacher that day had just said, okay, bye, you had a great day, and didn't make an effort to go and say hi and like talk to them, and that's super, super important.
Really
I've seen
good
it
suggestion.
happen.
Okay, so I've covered all the abuse and neglect, so we're gonna get into mandated reporting. Do you guys have any questions about that before we move on? I know it's late. Okay, I'm trying to move. So this is the statute. It is a criminal offense to not report when you are a mandated reporter. That can be a very scary, scary thing. Just know that you are not responsible to figure out if the child's been abused or neglected. If you have a suspicion, you have some signs that you're worried about, your only obligation is to make a report. And that's where it ends. Okay, you don't have to investigate, you don't have to absolutely know what's happening. It can be a hard thing when you have like a really good relationship with the family, because some people are like, if I make a report, they're gonna take their kids. Probably not. Okay, like it's actually a really low percentage that we actually remove kids. It has to be like this out of control, we cannot make a plan to keep this kid safe type of situation. Most often, we're just going out, we're assessing what's happening and determining if we need to make any plan or if the family just needs some services, because sometimes families just need help. And it's not this punitive, like, you're screwing up and we're taking your kids type of situation. Okay.
Do you let the parent know when, like, who reported it?
Thank you for bringing that up. So by law, we cannot.
Okay.
Okay, so your information is kept confidential.
What
You
about the
can't-
institution?
No, it's the
Okay,
same.
the whole thing, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So by law, we cannot tell the family who made the report. As a mandated reporter, you are required to give your name and number. If you are not a mandated reporter, you can choose to still remain anonymous when you make your reports. I have a list of like a lot of different mandated reporters. It's usually professionals that are having contact with kids. I'm not going to read them all to you guys. Animal control, you know, if people are abusing their animals, they're probably abusing their children as well. Okay, so it's a class 3 misdemeanor. You'd be liable for damages if you choose not to make the report. We don't have this like team of investigators that goes out and tries to find people that aren't reporting. Right? We don't do that. In my years, I'm only aware of one person that was criminally charged for failing to make a report, and it was someone that was in my position that would go out and educate people, and they didn't report sexual abuse. Okay, so it does happen. But like I said, we don't have this team of people that goes out and investigates. Like, we're not trying to catch people not making a report. We just really want you to make reports, okay? Because kids can't self-protect, okay? And if you are concerned enough that sometimes you've got to be that person to advocate. And I know that, like I said, it can be a really tough situation to be in.
So let's say that little boy I was speaking about goes to the hospital and they're like, okay, well, we're going to report you, and then they come back and they find out that he was being abused. Does that come back? Obviously, they're going to be like, well, where is he throughout the day in Miss Taylor's classroom? Does that come back on me that I didn't call before they did, or that how does that, I mean, that would be my biggest fear of
Yeah, so
holding off on
you are
doing that.
only required to make a report when you have a suspicion or you know of abuse or neglect. And when we get reports, we will be like, okay, well, who has eyes on this kid? But when we're like tracking that back, it's to get collateral information, not to hold somebody
Like, what
accountable.
have you seen?
Right? It's like, what else do you know about this so we can make a better decision on what we know now? This is more on that. HIPAA does not apply when it comes to the safety of a child. Okay. Medical officers have to give us everything, like including medical records. Like, it just goes out the window when we're talking about safety of kids. So by reporting to the hotline, to the department, or law enforcement, you don't have to report to both, you just have to report to one. Sometimes it makes more sense to report to law enforcement, like the kid that's locked in the hot car outside in the Walmart parking lot. To me, it makes more sense to call law enforcement. If you call me, I'm going to be hanging up and calling law enforcement.
So if you call law enforcement and they don't think that it's their deal, do they hang up and call you, or do they tell the caller you need to call?
So law enforcement, we have a system where they send us their reports of involving juveniles, minors. So they, stuff absolutely, unfortunately, falls through the cracks. But we do have a system in place that we communicate with each other about what is theirs, what is ours, what is together, both of ours. But if it's like an emergency, like 911, like this kid is locked in this car, to me 911 makes more sense, but just call one of us, okay? We're gonna ask a billion questions when you call. If you don't have to know the answer. Like, some people will start getting like frustrated or upset, so like, I don't know that. It's okay. I don't know is a completely acceptable answer. I'm still gonna ask the question, because if you do know, it's gonna help us make a better decision. So it's absolutely okay for you not to know. Before you make a call, if you can get this information together, it's gonna help us so much, okay? So sometimes people don't know, maybe it's like you're calling on your neighbor. You're like, I only know their first name and their address. Great, well, I can figure that out. Maybe you only have like a very unique name. Sometimes we can even figure that out. So what you have is what you have, and we'll work with whatever it is. But if you have access to this information, please share it with us. We definitely want to know the family composition. Who lives in each house, which you may or may not know. Because like when I was talking about that sexual abuse, kind of completely change our response. If that victim and that PRAN, we call them PRANs, person responsible for abuse or neglect, perpetrator, suspect, all that kind of stuff. It's really the same thing. Okay? But we want to know if that person is in the same house. We're going to talk about everything that you're concerned about. That extra detail that you know about the kid is really helpful. Like you were saying, they're not scared of their mom at all. They get really excited. They run up to them and give them a hug. Like, I don't see any of those things. But I'm concerned about X, Y, Z. We talked about non-leading questions. If you are reporting an injury, we're going to be asking a lot of details about that injury. So where is it located? Like, it's on his arm. Which arm? Where on the arm? Like, how big is it? What color is it? So if you can kind of pay attention and be able to answer kind of those detailed questions because it's going to, once again, change the way that we respond. Like, how big is it? Where is it located? So we can figure out how serious this injury is. So after we get through all of what your concerns are, we're gonna go into what we call enhanced screening. So that's where we're trying to really pull out that support system for the family, the strengths, the things that they're doing well. If there's like cultural sensitivities that we need to be aware of, like the religious type of practice, or maybe they don't speak English, that would be really helpful to know in advance. We wanna know if this house is dangerous for us to go to. You know, cause sometimes it's me just knocking on a door. So I would love to know if they are violent gun collectors beforehand, or if they have 10 pit bulls. I would love to know that beforehand. Because I have been to houses and I'm like, oh my gosh,
I'm not
there's
getting out
some
of the car.
scary dogs.
Yeah.
So, opinions. This is where you get to share your opinion. Like, what do you want to see happen? Some people are like, well, it's your job, you figure that out. That's fine. Like, some people are like, well, I think they need family therapy, I think they need life skills, they need some budgeting. You know, like, throw it out there if you think you know, like, if you have suggestions. This is the chance that you get to kind of give your opinions there. And then the scaling question could be really obnoxious to some people. Some people really like it, but you get to scale how safe you feel like that kid is in that house, all right? So it seems like it's backwards because people always give me backwards. They'll be like, it's so scary, but 10 is very safe. You're not worried about the kid at all. So that might be your situation. You're not worried about that kid in his house at all. So you're going to scale 10. He's totally safe. 0 is this child is at risk of death. Okay, so that's the scale. Some people are like, I don't know. That's fine. You don't have to give me a number. I have to ask the question. Sometimes it's awkward. But that's another opinion question for you guys. So after someone makes a report, how many people think we just jump in the car and go take the kids?
You don't.
I know it seems like that in the movies, right? I mean, some of my education is seriously based on movies, but that's not how it works. We have to go through a screening process. A team of people are going to look at all the information that's been provided and all of the history. So just because you made a report doesn't mean it just was for nothing. Because sometimes these reports, sometimes I'm on the phone 20, 30 minutes with somebody. It takes a long time sometimes, but depending on how well you know them, that's a big chunk of your life on a work day when you have to go home and get dinner ready and all that. We're going to look at all of the history. We're going to look at all the criminal history of every single person in that house. We'll be looking at what kind of services they've had to help make that decision. If it meets criteria, which the criteria I'm talking about is what's set out in the laws, it's assigned to a caseworker. Caseworker goes out and starts assessing what's going on. Okay. That's the state hotline number. So we talked about our immediate response. That's like right now. It's happening right now. We also have a 3-day response and a 5-day response. So sometimes we're not even going to go out for a week. That's 5 business days, depending on how serious the allegations are. As a referral source, if you want to know, you can call and ask. You can say, hey, I made a report yesterday, what happened with that? And we will tell you. Okay, it got assigned, it didn't get assigned. This is the caseworker, you can call them, or it didn't get assigned because it didn't meet criteria, or this is a third-party offense, we had to send it to law enforcement, or we don't have jurisdiction, we had to send it somewhere else. Like, there's lots of different reasons why we can't assign it. But you can call and ask. If you have an ongoing relationship with a child, like you are their daycare provider every day, we're going to ask, do you have an ongoing relationship with a child? Because then we're going to send you a letter in the mail within 30 days telling you what we did with that referral that you made.
So how much are you allowed to tell? Like, are you allowed to go into detail if the parents are in jail or the kid was removed, or how much are you allowed to tell when we ask what happened?
So you cannot have all of the information. There is confidentiality. Sometimes we're just going to be continuing to ask you questions and get more information from you. Someone being in jail is public information, so that's something that we'd be able to share. You know, where the child is placed, that's confidential. We can't talk to you about that kind of stuff. But yeah, you just need to get in touch with the caseworker and ask your questions and see what they can share with you. Sometimes I've seen providers become the foster care for the kids, because sometimes you have that kind of attachment. You really want to be the one to take care of them, and there's a process you can go through to be that person.
Over like maybe a family member?
Sometimes there are no family that are willing to take kids, and sometimes there are no appropriate family. So, yeah. So how long did you do foster care?
2 years. Not really long, but
That's a really long time.
Long
In the
enough.
world of child welfare, that's a really long time. Usually people have like 18 months that they can hang in there. Yeah. We're in desperate need of foster families. A little-
Shameless
You
plug.
need a side job? We have one.
it's not a side job. Don't let me. It's not a side job.
You don't get paid.
It is the job.
Okay, so the assessment process, at the end of it, we're gonna make a finding. Okay, there's founded, inconclusive, or unfounded. This is the same for an institutional. Doing an assessment, we're gonna make a finding. Founded is similar to that,